Right now, if your house gets cold, you tap a screen. Heat fills the room in seconds. You barely notice winter anymore. But the real answer to how humans survive the cold is far stranger and far darker than a thermostat. For most of human history, winter was not an inconvenience. It was a season that killed. Your ancestors didn't survive it with comfort. They survived it with tactics that would horrify you today. Some of them still live inside your body, quietly, waiting. Picture Europe 40,000 years ago. Snow doesn't fall for a week, it falls for months. The sun disappears behind gray for so long that time itself seems to freeze. Food that took all summer to gather is already gone by the first frost. And somewhere in a cave, a small group of humans is making a decision that will decide who lives until spring. There was no calendar warning them how long the season would last. There was no way to know if this winter would be like the last one or worse. Every choice, how much to eat today, how far to travel for firewood, who slept closest to the flame, carried real weight. A wrong guess in autumn could mean starvation in February. This uncertainty shaped human behavior more deeply than almost anything else in our evolutionary past. It taught the species to plan, to hoard carefully, and to watch each other closely for signs of weakness or strength. Archaeologists studying Ice Age settlements across what is now France and Spain have found something telling. The largest, most elaborate cave sites cluster in regions that would have offered the best winter shelter: protection from wind, proximity to reliable water, southern-facing entrances that caught what little sun the season allowed. Ancient humans weren't just surviving winter, they were studying it, generation after generation, refining a body of knowledge about cold that never got written down, only lived. The first tactic wasn't clever, it was brutal. Ancient humans ate fat before anything else. Not meat first, fat first. Lean meat eaten alone in deep winter can actually starve a person to death, a condition modern researchers call rabbit starvation, because the body cannot metabolize pure protein fast enough without enough fat or carbohydrate alongside it. Archaeologist John Speth has argued that Ice Age hunters understood this instinctively, prioritizing bone marrow and animal fat over muscle meat whenever the cold deepened. They cracked bones open like they were mining for treasure. In a way, they were. Why does this matter to you? Because your body still remembers. That craving for rich, fatty food when the temperature drops isn't weakness. It's 40,000 winters whispering through your DNA. Fat wasn't just calories to these people, it was currency. Groups tracked which animals carried the most fat reserves by season, favoring certain hunts in autumn specifically because the prey had spent all summer fattening up for their own winter survival. Humans were, in a sense, harvesting other species' preparation for the cold and converting it into their own. Bone marrow, brain tissue, and organ fat became prized foods precisely because they offered dense energy in a season where energy was scarce and every wasted calorie of effort mattered. The second tactic is where things turn darker. When food ran out completely, when the marrow was gone and the last stores were empty, some ancient groups didn't just endure hunger, they planned around it. Evidence from multiple prehistoric sites in Europe shows unmistakable cut marks on human bones, patterns that closely resemble how the same groups butchered animals for food. Researcher Sylvia Bello and colleagues studying remains at Gough's cave in England documented cut marks, deliberate breakage, and even a human skull modified into what looks like a drinking cup. This wasn't random violence, it was survival behavior in a landscape offering nothing else. This pattern wasn't isolated to one site or one culture. Similar evidence has surfaced across multiple prehistoric contexts in Europe, separated by thousands of years and hundreds of miles, suggesting this wasn't an aberration. It was a grim, recurring feature of life at the edge of survival, a last resort that surfaced again and again whenever a group's options ran out completely. Sit with that for a second. Not a shock, as context. When a group faces starvation with no alternative, human history shows the boundary between taboo and survival can dissolve entirely. It's not that your ancestors were monstrous, it's that winter, in its cruelest form, made monsters of circumstance, not of character. You don't have to imagine that world, but your comfort today exists because enough people crossed that line, or found another way, often barely. Every full pantry you've ever taken for granted stands on top of a history where the alternative to eating was not hunger, it was death, slow and certain, with nothing left to negotiate. The third tactic is quieter, and it's still inside you right now. You've probably noticed something strange about winter. You want to sleep more. You feel sluggish in the afternoon. You crave carbohydrates you'd normally ignore. Doctors sometimes call this seasonal affective disorder, as if it's a malfunction. But sleep researcher Thomas Weir ran an experiment in the 1990s that suggests otherwise. He placed participants in near total darkness for 14 hours a night, mimicking ancient winter daylight hours. Within weeks, their sleep split into two distinct blocks, separated by 1 or 2 hours of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night. This wasn't insomnia, it was a return to something older. For most of human history, winter nights were 14 hours long, and staying awake through all of them, huddled and hungry, wasn't survival, it was waste. Your ancestors likely slept in segments, waking briefly in the dark to tend a fire, share warmth, or simply exist quietly together before drifting off again. Some historians believe this first sleep and second sleep pattern persisted well into pre-industrial Europe, only vanishing after artificial lighting rewired how humans used the night. So when you jolt awake at 3 in the morning and panic that something is wrong with you, consider this instead. Your body might just be doing what it was built to do in a world that no longer needs it to. There's something almost tender buried in this pattern. That quiet hour of wakefulness in the deep night wasn't wasted time to your ancestors. Historical letters and diaries from pre-industrial Europe occasionally reference this middle hour, describing it as a time for prayer, quiet conversation, or simply lying still beside another person in the dark. Before electric light erased the need for segmented sleep, that gap in the night may have been one of the few genuinely peaceful moments winter offered. A small pocket of stillness between two long stretches of vulnerability. The fourth tactic was social, and it may be the most important one of all. Ancient humans didn't survive winter as individuals. They survived it as tightly bound groups, sleeping in piles for warmth, sharing food even when it meant less for themselves, and enforcing brutal social pressure against anyone who hoarded. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies, including work by researcher Polly Weissner on the Juhansi people of the Kalahari, have found that food sharing wasn't generosity in the way you might picture it. It was insurance. If you shared your kill today, others would share with you tomorrow when your luck ran out and theirs held. In winter, that insurance policy was the difference between a family and the grave. Isolation in the ancient world wasn't just lonely, it was often fatal. A person cast out from the group in deep winter had almost no chance of surviving alone. This is why so much of human social behavior, the guilt you feel when you take too much, the instinct to check on someone who's gone quiet, the deep discomfort of eating well while others go without, traces back to a season that punished selfishness with death. Fire deserves its own mention because it changed everything, and yet it wasn't simple. Maintaining a fire through an entire winter required constant labor. Someone had to feed it through the night, every night for months. Groups likely rotated fire watch duties, a kind of ancient night shift, ensuring the flame never died while everyone else slept. Losing the fire in the depth of winter, especially without reliable tools to restart it quickly, could be a death sentence for the entire group. That's why some archaeologists believe humans learned to carry embers between camps rather than always starting from scratch, treating fire less like a tool and more like a member of the group that had to be kept alive. Think about what that meant psychologically. Someone was always awake. Someone was always watching.
The fire demanded a kind of vigilance that never fully switched off, even in the group's most vulnerable hours. This constant low-grade watchfulness may have shaped something deep in human temperament, a baseline alertness to danger that never quite disappears, even now, even when the modern world has all but eliminated the threat that created it. Some researchers who study sleep and anxiety have speculated that the human tendency to wake at the slightest unfamiliar sounds, even in a locked, heated home, is a distant descendant of fire watch instincts that once meant the difference between waking up and not waking up at all. There was also a hierarchy to warmth itself. In many reconstructed hunter-gatherer social structures, the coldest sleeping positions, farthest from the fire, nearest the cave mouth, were occupied by the group's most physically capable adults, while children, the elderly, and the sick were pushed toward the center of the heat. This wasn't necessarily selflessness in the way you might picture it today. It was a calculated investment. Protecting those who could not protect themselves and stationing the strongest at the vulnerable edges kept the group's future intact, even at real personal cost to individuals. There's a strange twist hiding underneath all of this. The very traits that helped your ancestors survive winter, craving fat, sleeping in fragmented bursts, bonding fiercely with a small circle of people, sharing resources under quiet social pressure, are the same traits that shape your life today, even though the danger that built them is gone. You crave comfort food in December not because you're undisciplined, but because a body built across 100,000 winters doesn't know the difference between a heated apartment and a snowbound cave. You feel a pull toward closeness with a small group of trusted people in the colder, darker months, not by coincidence, but because isolation once meant death. Even your instinct to check in on a friend who's gone quiet during a hard season is an echo of a rule that had to be obeyed or else. Winter no longer threatens you the way it threatened them, but your biology hasn't caught up to that fact. It's still running code written for a world where the cold outside could kill you and the person beside you was often the only thing standing between you and that fate. So tonight, when the heater clicks on and you barely register it, remember what that switch replaced. It replaced fire watch shifts through freezing nights. It replaced marrow cracked from bone because there was nothing left. It replaced group upon group who didn't make it, and the ones who did only because they shared, endured, and occasionally crossed lines no one wants to imagine crossing. You are not separate from that history. You are the result of it. Every craving, every instinct to gather close when the days grow short, every strange hour you spend awake in the middle of the night is a message from ancestors who fought a season you'll never have to fight the same way. Winter used to be the test that decided who got to have descendants at all. Your proof of who passed.